and hopefully I can work this thing. I'll tell you what. I'm trying to catch up with technology at my age. Yes, a funny thing happened on the way to Armageddon. And that is how a lot of people see Armageddon. This great battle at the end of time. And usually, I mean, there are so many variations of this that you can go gray studying it. I used to think that my gray hair was from my kids and my grandkids. It's not. It's all the study I did on Revelation. I mean, you go down these rabbit holes and they just take you everywhere. And you just have to say, I've had enough. But most people, it's the United States of America, intrinsically connected to Israel. And in years going by, it was China and Russia. And now, we're going to get to later, they've interjected Islam. I wonder why. Yeah. But this is what it looks like to most people. It's this big battle at the end of time. Well, what does the Bible really say about Armageddon? Well, it's over in 16 of Revelation, chapter 16. And it begins in verse 12. And this is where the bowls are poured out. We're going to talk about 3 woes that Revelation talks about. And the things that God's going to do to his enemies. But anyway, it says, the 6th angel poured out this bowl on the great river Euphrates. And its water was dried up. Let me try to... Whoops, that went too far, didn't it? Well, this is not going to work.
Dad, do you need some help? Do you want to use the clicker and just tell me when you want me to push it?
Yeah, maybe.
Here we go.
I'm trying to get back.
Yes. Yeah.
There it is.
Do you want me to do it or do you want
No, I'll try it, thanks. Then I saw 3 evil spirits that looked like frogs. I'm just trying to give you a little background here. They came out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. They are the spirits of demons performing miraculous signs. And they go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them for the battle of the great day of God Almighty. And then Jesus warns them there. I'm not going to read that. Then they gathered the kings together to the place in Hebrew is called Armageddon. And that's it. 1 verse out of the entire Bible. 1 verse out of Revelation. And from that, they get all kinds of futuristic things that we're supposed to be going through right now. This afternoon, or today, I was substitute teaching in a middle school in Round Rock, and there happened to be another guy there. We didn't have much to do because they were star testing, and so we were monitoring the hall. We got to talking. And I told him what I was doing tonight, and he said, well, tell me about the end time. What's the judgment? What's going to happen? You know, and I said, I don't think you and I are going to agree on this topic. And we didn't. And he was very upset with me. We had a nice conversation, but he was just upset that I wasn't going to tell him, yeah, it's right around the corner. It's coming. You better watch it. It's on us. It's any time now. And I didn't say that. But they not only take this verse, they also go to several other verses that they connect to Armageddon, chapter 9, verses 13 through 21. Turn over there for just a second. The 6th angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming from the horns of the golden altar that is before God. It said to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels who had been kept ready for this very hour, day, month, and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. The number of the mounted troops was 200 million. I heard the number. He didn't see it because it was too many. Revelation is very visual. It's very audio. It's very technicolor. I can't do technicolor, but it is. He only heard the number. And those, the premillennialists, the futurists, dispensationalists, and they all mean basically the same thing, they believe that in the Battle of Armageddon, there'll be 200 million troops. All in the little towny state of Israel on the last day. And then they go to this verse, chapter 14. 14 through 20. And another angel came out of his temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. Still another angel who had charge of the fire came from the altar and called in a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle. Take your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grapes from the earth's vine, because its grapes are ripe. The angel swung his sickle on the earth, gathered its grapes, and threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. They were trampled in the winepress outside the city, and blood flowed out of the press, rising as high as the horses' bridles for a distance of 1,600 stadia, 180 miles. The futurist, when that 200 million meets and has that battle in Israel, of course you can't get 200 million in Israel, there's going to be blood flowing 5 feet deep at least for 180 miles. That's how they look at it. Then they go to chapter 19, 17 through 21. And here it says, "And I saw an angel standing in the sun, who cried in a loud voice to the birds flying in midair, 'Come, gather together for the great supper of God, so that you may eat the flesh of kings and generals and mighty men, of horses and their riders, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, small and great.'" They say that's Armageddon. Doesn't say Armageddon, but that's what they say it is. That's Armageddon. And then one more. The last battle of all in chapter 20. Verse 7. "When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. In number they are like the sand of the sea. They marched across the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people, the city he loves. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet have been thrown. They will be tormented day and night forever and ever." That's part of what they believe is Armageddon. They take everything, well, they don't take everything literally. What they don't want to be literal, they'll use. What they want to be literal, they make it literal. I mean, the winepress is not literal. That's really God's wrath against them. And on and on and on. It's just one of those things. One verse, and thousands and thousands of pages about Armageddon. Well, it came from this gentleman right here. Whoops. Boy, I don't get this. John Nelson Darby. He's an Irishman. He lived, and he wrote and he preached in the beginning in the 1840s on. And he's the father of pre-tribulation rapture theory. And also a lot of this idea of when Armageddon is going to be and what Armageddon is. Some of the verses that I've just talked about. And what helped spread his theology was the 1908 Scofield Reference Bible. I used to have one. Hundreds of thousands of people bought it.
Really?
And it's a pervasive theology out there in evangelical Christianity today. It's also big among the Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses. And on and on and on it goes. I used to have one, as I said, and we used to read the notes, not only in Revelation, but throughout the whole translation. We'd read those notes as if that was Scripture. And it's just a man's opinion. That's all it was. If you have a Scofield Reference Bible, and you're not trying to learn what they taught and something about Revelation, burn it. You'll be better off. Because it's just full of it. This guy was pre Harry Potter.
Yeah!
He's Harry Potter long before Harry Potter ever came on the scene. And I tell you, his imagination, what's it, R.K. Rowling? She's the writer?
J.K. Rowling.
J.K. He'll match J.K.'s any day.
Oh.
If you read, yes. And I'm wondering if she didn't get some Harry Potter from him. Seriously, this guy. What's wrong with this? I know. Futurism. It's a prophetic look from the 1st century into the 19th century. And then, the 20th century, and then the 21st century. I mean, in his day, in John Nelson Darby's, it was the 19th century. Uh-oh, nothing came true. Well, then, it was the 20th century. Hal Lindsey, Tom LaHaye, Jack Van Imp. Well, that didn't work. Now it's the 21st century. Well, what century is it? All of these guys, their Revelation is just that, a crystal ball look into today's world. And they basically ignore the audience to whom it was written. in the first century. Let me see if I can get this thing, point it, go. But the Bible, the funny thing happened on the way to Armageddon is the Bible gets them right. If you really look at the Bible, you really look at Revelation. Revelation is a revelation. That's what the word apocalypse means. It means it's a revealing. It's an uncovering. It's an unmasking. It's not hiding anything. It's all open. Well, it is hidden to God's enemies. Because apocalyptical literature is written in code language. Apocalyptical literature was well known in the first century, both among the Jews and among the Greeks. It is a revelation. It says it in the first 3 verses. That I'm uncovering this for you to see. The Christians in the first century who were suffering persecution, and many of them living in the 7 churches of Asia, they knew what the message was. It was not hidden to them. Now, if that book, John's sending the book from Patmos to the 7 churches and it falls into the hands of the Romans, they don't know what's going on. The Jews probably wouldn't even know. If it fell into the wrong hands, that's okay, because it's code language. It's a lot of symbolism, a lot of allegory, big pictures. It just keeps coming at you, coming at you, coming at you, coming at you. These big, gross, grotesque visions is to catch your attention. It's to take your breath away. It's to, what's this all about? And to listen to it. Written to the 7 churches there in Asia. The historical background, the cultural background, the economic background, the political background, all fits the 7 churches of Asia. And vice versa. Revelation fits that. Any translation of Revelation, any interpretation of Revelation that does not address the audience to whom it was written is not a good interpretation. We don't do that with Romans, do we? No, we don't. Name another book in the New Testament that we do that with. There is none. We want to know the background of Hebrews. We want to know the background of Matthew. We want to know the background of Jude. We want to know the background of Romans or 1 Corinthians or Philippians or whatever, don't we? Yep. Because it adds substance to the message. It gives background. It gives it some character. It helps you understand it better. Revelation is no different. This is the 22nd letter of the New Testament. We have the 4 Gospels, 1 history, Acts, in 21 letters, they say. And then we get they say the book of prophecy, which is Revelation. It's a letter. It's a letter, just like the rest of them. And it's written to people then and there. They had real problems. They had real sin. They had real persecution. And it's written to them. It's not written to Dave Pickens in the 21st century. Oh, it is because it's eternal. Romans wasn't written to you and to me. We weren't the original audience. There was no book in the New Testament that was originally written to us. They had their audience in the first century. This book is no different at all. And sometimes I think we see, like our planet, you know, our planetary system. Plato's way out there. Now it's not even a planet. And that's where Revelation is. It's way out there. No. It's part of the New Testament canon. And you can actually use the New Testament canon to interpret it. Revelation has a lot of Old Testament characters, Old Testament events, Old Testament thoughts and concepts with New Testament meaning. One of those is the concept of Jew. You'll read in there in the first couple chapters, those who say they are Jews and are not, I'm going to take care of. What's that? What? Those who say they're Jews and are not, what's that all about? He's talking to Christians, but that was code language. Romans 2, 28 and 29. A real Jew is one inward and not outward. Philippians 3, 4. We are the true circumcision who worship God in the Spirit and put no confidence in the flesh. Galatians chapter 6, 16. He says, it's neither circumcision or uncircumcision that counts, but a new creation. And peace be upon the Israel of God who accepts this, or something like that. The Jews in the first century didn't accept that. We're the Israel of God. It's not the state of Israel. Forget that. Yeah, I know what Romans says in 9, 10, and 11 about God didn't reject the Jews. And He doesn't. They can still be saved with the same faith that you and I have. But we are the real Jews, and they were the real Jews back then. Christians are. You can't talk that way to a premillennialist. Because Israel. John Hagee down in San Antonio, man. The United States and Israel just bound like this. because he's a premillennialist. It's written for its day and its time. It's not written for 21 centuries. 21 centuries later is not going to help their persecution. Am I supposed to be on that?
Yep.
Thank you. He put that together. Another funny thing happened on the way to Armageddon is their predictions never come true. In over 170 years since John Nelson Darby ever printed anything, none of it's ever come true. Not one. Not one. 1970, Hal Lindsey, The Late Great Planet Earth. And he says that 40 years, and I don't have time to go into all that stuff, 40 years after Israel is reestablished in 1948, that Jesus is going to come again. He's going to set up his 1,000-year reign. The Dome of the Rock is going to be removed. They're going to rebuild the temple, and they're going to have Armageddon. Well, 40 years from 1948, if I count right, it was 1988. I think the Dome of the Rock is still there. Don't you? Something's wrong with this picture. It doesn't stop Hal Lindsey. He just keeps. You talk about perpetual motion, that's what these prophecies are. These predictions, it's perpetual. You know, he's so exciting to listen to turn on the TV. I mean, it's like squeezing toothpaste. Isn't that exciting? Watching water drip, drip into a sieve. Exciting guy. Jack Van Impe, he's always going like this. And he quotes from anywhere in the Bible. He doesn't care about context one little bit. He just quotes it. Well, you can't do that to the Bible and be true to the Scriptures. You just can't. And on these guys go. And now they've interjected Islam into it. Why? 9/11. It was against America. It's in the news. It's still in the news. These guys come up to the daily newspaper or the 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news, and they lay their Bible down and they watch the 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news or read the newspaper and say, "Where's that in the Bible?" It's got to be in here because it's in the news. It's a modern day event. It's got to be in here, so they look for it and they force it into there. They will not be taught by God. They won't be. Maybe hard to say, maybe even harsh to say. They won't. They'll teach God. They're teaching God what it says. They teach the Bible. They will not be taught by that. Not on this subject. You just read them. Spend some time with them. And get gray hair like I did. They will not be taught. That guy today, Jesus, at the middle school, when we were talking about Revelation, he's not going to be taught. Boy, he was... Right away, he wanted to argue. He wasn't going to listen. Anyway, I gave him a thumbnail sketch of this thing tonight, and he left. So these predictions never come. They never come true. And you can't find one, ever. So, what does Deuteronomy 18:21-22 say? How do you know if a prophet is teaching the truth? I'm just paraphrasing. He says if it comes true. If what they say or predict comes true, you know the prophet is true. If he doesn't, he's speaking presumptuously. Don't be afraid of him. Meaning, don't give him any credibility. Don't believe him. Don't follow him. Don't go his way. Because he's wrong. He's a false prophet. Because what he's saying is not coming true. All of those guys, none of what I've ever said has ever come true. What's that make them? You answer that. And then finally, the end of persecution is the key to a better understanding of Revelation. Revelation is basically made up of 3 woes. Now, it starts in, of course, chapter 1's an introduction. 2 and 3 is about the 7 churches. 4, God is on the throne. 5, Jesus, because he's died, is worthy to open the seals. And beginning with the opening of the seals, 7 seals in chapter 6, that's the beginning of the first woe. And it goes through chapter 9 and verse 12. You just turn over there, and I'll show you from the scripture itself that it says this is the first woe. This is the first set of plagues that God's going to bring on his enemies. Excuse me. Yeah, 9:12. The first woe is past. 2 other woes are yet to come. The first woe is past. It includes the 7 seals, and then it includes 5 trumpets. And when God's judgment upon mankind comes, when these plagues come, they're very generalized. Very generalized. It's a white horse for conquest. It's a red horse for war. It's a black horse for pestilence and famine. And it's a pale horse for death. And then there's some interludes in there. And then it starts the 5 trumpets. And you look at those 5 trumpets, it becomes a little more specific, but it's still incomplete and it's partial. God, He curses a third of the seas. He curses a third of the ships. He curses a third of the drinking water. He curses a third of the sun's light, a third of the moon's light, and a third of the star's light. It's just partial. It's just partial. And this first woe is self-contained. It doesn't move on to number 2, and 2 doesn't move on to 3. It's number 1. And God says, I'm going to hammer you. You're picking on my people, and I'm going to hammer you. And this is how I'm going to hammer you. I like that term. It just sounds really masculine. Oh, and all that stuff. Sorry. That's the first woe. The second woe is 1 trumpet. 9:13 through 11:14. Turn over to 11:14. I'll show you it says that. Premillennialists don't want to believe it. Everything's literal except when it's literal. Then they make it symbolic when it flies away somewhere. And they don't have to deal with it. 11:14. Sorry. The second woe has passed. The third woe is coming soon. Ooh, coming soon. That term is used 6 times in Revelation. Coming soon. 2 other times it says the time is near. Oh, coming soon, time is near. That's 2100 centuries from now. Really? Paul told Timothy to come to him soon. Timothy, I need the cloaks and I need the parchments. Would you come to me in the 21st century? Sure. Yeah, I'll be right there. But first, I got to get a drink of water. No, he's coming soon. But it says it's the second woe, and this woe is contained. It's this woe. And he's hammering them. And the enemies went probably at this time thinking, boy, I'd like to get a break. And God says, you're not getting one because of the third one coming. And this is the last one. And that is in chapter, it goes 11:15 to really 20 verse 15. But it ends, the bowls end in chapter 16. He dumps out the last bowl in chapter 16. Well, 1 trumpet, the 7th trumpet, and 7 bowls in chapter 16. It doesn't say this is the third woe, that it's fulfilled. It just understands it. It's just understood. This is the third woe. And God's hammering His enemies. 17, 18, 19, you're going to get a whole lot more detailed exactly who this is. With the last woe, his outpouring of His wrath is complete. There's nothing partial about it. There's nothing incomplete about it. It's fully done. And now you're going to get the real, detailed picture of who God is going to finish off. And let me just say this, it's complicated. I mean, it's not easy. I don't have all the answers. But to me, it was the Roman Emperor Domitian. That's who it is. Come see this woman seated on many waters. And then there are other pictures. And then there's 7 kings, and one of them is dead, and he comes back to life. And there's the Nero Redavidus theory that Nero raised from the dead, and he's over in the east, and he's going to come back, and this is part of that. John didn't believe that, but he used that theory to talk about all this. It's very complicated, but it's it's Domitian. In the 1st century, so that later on, in chapters 19, it says, in 1 hour, Rome's gone. It says it 3 times. 3 times. 3 is a very important number in the book of Revelation. How many times in the Bible, how many times was Jesus tempted? And how many times did He answer, it is written? 3 times. How many times did Jesus talk about loving, going after the one sheep and leaving the 99 and going after the one sheep. Losing one coin, forgetting about the 9 and going after the one coin, and going after the prodigal son. There are 3 stories about the same thing in Luke 15. The lost sheep, the lost coin, and lost boy. 3 times. We better pay attention. There's emphasis. How many times was the sheep let down out of heaven in Acts chapter 10 for Peter to get the message? The gospel is also for the Gentiles. 3 times. How many times did Paul suffer and say, God, remove this thorn from me? 3 times. And God said, no, my power is sufficient for, it's made sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. 3 times. How many times did Jesus ask Peter, do you love me, in order to reinstate him? 3 times. How many woes are there in Revelation? 3. Because God's hammering home, you guys are dying. What are you doing about it? I'm taking care of it. I'm going to have 3 powerful woes to punish my enemies and your enemies. So, you're okay. And of course, throughout the book, there are these little interludes like chapter 7 and other places where it shows my people are taken care of. In all of this destruction and all of this condemnation, you're okay. You might have lost your life, but you're safe for eternity. And so, over there in chapter 19, Rome's going down. I'm trying to see where that is. Well, it's my fault. I'm too old. Whoa, great city. O Babylon, city of power. In 1 hour, your doom has come. That's verse 10 of 18. And then verse 16. He says the same thing. Whoa, great city. In 1 hour, such great wealth has been brought to ruin. And then in verse 19. Whoa, great city. And he says, in 1 hour, she has been brought to ruin. Rome never fell instantaneously. It took 400 more years. Domitian fell within 24 hours. He was murdered by his inner circle. And nobody else could murder him because he had these particular stones all over his palace. Some on the wall, mostly on the floor. It was like a mirror. You could not sneak up on this guy because he could see everybody at 360 degrees. There was no way you were going to sneak up on this boy and do him in. But people that he had surrounded him with, that he trusted, one was his wife, they say, they murdered him. He went down. When Domitian goes down, I'm telling you, Rome goes down. We read too much into this Rome thing. It's one person. Because that's what was getting the Christians in trouble in the first century. They would once a year pinch a little incense to Caesar and say, Caesar is Lord. They couldn't do that. Before we baptize somebody today, what do we say? Jesus is Lord, not Caesar. And that's what got them into hot water with the Roman government, especially Domitian. He was crazy. He was insane, but he was sane insane. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He was wicked. He was evil. He butchered people. He murdered people just for... One guy in France made a sword in his name. He had him killed because it wasn't in his name. And when he entered into public forums, he wanted to be called Lord and God. Domitian, Caesar Domitian. That's true. He was hated so much that within a few days after he died, the Roman Senate began a campaign to erase his name from Roman history. They hated him so bad. That's why you can't find a whole lot of information about him, because they tried to destroy it.
Wow.
And so, in the first century, the Roman emperor, he personified Rome. He was Rome. Earlier on, before, there was the goddess Roma to the spirit of Rome. I mean, Rome turned the world upside down for the right reason. I mean, the Roman peace, they'd never seen that before. The Roman peace. You could go anywhere you wanted to on land or sea, and you were safe. There was nothing like it. The roads. I mean, the architect, the building, the Romans, they had wheat and oats 200 miles in on North Africa from Egypt to Tunisia through their aqueducts. Some people say, they knew how to take salt out of the water and move it into inland on aqueducts. These guys were powerful. And he epitomized all this. So when he goes down, I'm telling you, Rome goes with him. And that's how he pictured it. They needed a big picture to say, this man's gone. And when he dies, the persecution stops. It's over. And so, I think that's what it's saying about, the fall of Rome. It's really the fall of Domitian. And it's part of that third woe. God finished him off. That's all there was to it. So I've lost you so far, huh? Oh, brother. Maybe you should have been up here. Ah! No, I don't want that one. I don't want that one. Oh, how do I do that, Josie?
There we go.
Is that where you wanted to be?
Well, I went faster than I thought I was going to. I was in a hurry. I didn't think I was going to get through this. I do want to say something before all of this. I'm glad that the premillennialists bring up Islam. We need to engage Islam. They're here and they're now. What can they do to us? What better place in the world to have a conversation and a dialogue with a Muslim than here? They're going to cut your head off? Put you in jail? Cut your arms off? Cut your tongue? They can't do that. Well, maybe they could. But I mean, this is the place to take on Islam. I don't mean in a confrontational way. I meant a conversation. This is the place to do it. Here and now. And we don't have anything to be afraid of. We do, but we do need to study Islam. And it's a rabbit hole that will take you to some different thinking than you thought before. They think differently than we do. And until you get down that rabbit hole, and it's not Alice in Wonderland down in there. I wish it were. But it'll challenge you. But that's okay. I mean, he's Johnny-come-lately. 600 years after Jesus. He didn't improve Christianity. He went backwards to the law. If you can answer Judaism, you can answer Islam, as far as I'm concerned. There's no difference. Salvation by law, that's all. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's Islam, in a nutshell. Islam was, another thing about Islam, I was the same school I was at today, I don't know, some time ago, and I was sitting in a world cultures class at 6th grade, and they're talking about Judaism and Christianity and Islam, and they say that Islam, Muhammad is a direct descendant of Ishmael. That's not true at all. His family, Muhammad's family, is from Yemen. Now, he was born in Mecca, but his family is from Yemen. Ishmael never got down into that part. He didn't hardly get into northern Arabia. And it looks like his lineage petered out in about 1100 BC or 1000 BC. Islam teaches that Abraham and Ishmael founded Mecca. That's not true. Mecca wasn't founded until the 4th century AD. I'm sorry, CE today. If you're really in with the crowd, you say Christian era, not AD. I'm just messing, but it's crazy. I don't know why they changed that. I'm sure Dave could tell me. But, it's not true. So much in Islam is just oral tradition, oral tradition, oral tradition. And there's no historical background behind it at all. Islam is made up of the Quran, obviously, the Hadith, and the Sharia. The Hadith is the sayings and the example of Muhammad on how to live Islam. Sharia takes Quran, Hadith, and then tries to form a Muslim law that Muslims can follow as the law. That's what the Sharia is. You have to study all three of those. Islam is much more than just a religion. It's a theocracy. It covers everything. Politics, education, medicine, all kinds of stuff. But we need to study that and know it. But I think the first approach is, I think we need to have a conversation with them and say, you know what? Let's just compare the character of Jesus and the character of Muhammad and see how that comes out. I don't think there'll be much left in Muhammad.
Nope.
When you compare him to the character of Jesus. But I think that's the way I would approach it. And then go to the other doctrinal issues at another time. We cannot understand it perfectly. Nobody does. But if you don't have some view of what it is and some confidence in it, you can never talk confidently with somebody about Revelation. I was scared to death of Revelation. One time my dad was at his hunting camp, and he went outside to go up to the outhouse, and he was tired, and he sat down while he's about to, and he heard this rattlesnake.
Oh.
5 feet long. He got up, went over and got a spade, come over, and boy, he killed that thing. And as he's throwing it down in the woods, I said, Dad, are you afraid of snakes? He said, no, but I have a healthy respect for them. I used to be afraid of Revelation. Now, I have a healthy respect for it. Any interpretation that does not deal with the people of the first century is a bad, as I said that before, is a bad interpretation. Premillennialism is out, the church history is out, the continuous history theory is out. There's one called the Praetus, which means its past, which basically I am, and the historical context. Those two. Yes, because they deal with what went on then and there, like any other New Testament book. So we need to feel comfortable with it. I felt very comfortable talking to Jesus today. I felt a little uncomfortable when he was getting upset, but that's par for the course. Then Revelation is a real letter, sent in the time and place it was written, and it's God's ultimate victory. Is the eternal message of Revelation. It is. Dave talked about not fearing on Sunday and overcoming fear. Well, if you want something to help you to overcome fear, embrace the message of Revelation. Because God's on our side. And our enemies are doomed.
That's right.
They're doomed. You know, going up against Rome in the first century would be like us right here, our little band. Let's say the whole church. And we band together. And we're going to take on the entire military of the United States of America. Mike, how do you think that would work out? Not very good. Well, I'll tell you, that's what it was like. These Christians, John writing this and taking on the Roman Empire, that's what it was like. But, you know, and none of this has to be literally fulfilled, in my opinion. I'll cite this to you and I'm done. Ezekiel 40 through 44, 45 is a picture of the temple rebuilt. And it's very detailed and it's very specific. Was that temple ever rebuilt? Did you know of? Did Zerubbabel, when he came back from Babylonian captivity, did he use that as his blueprint to build the temple in place of Solomon's temple? Because it was destroyed in 586 BC when the Babylonians came in and carried everybody off. Was that temple ever built? To my knowledge, never. Does that mean that vision was false? No, it doesn't. God wrote that. He used Ezekiel to write that. It was so sure in the mind of God they were returning from Babylonian captivity that he said, you take this vision I'm giving you of the temple, you write it in detail, and you basically say it's going to be rebuilt and the worship is restored. Because it's set in my mind, it needs to be set in your mind. That vision did not have to take place literally for that vision to be true. And neither does Revelation. It's just a word picture, man, saying, we're going to have victory and here's how I'm going to do it. And I'm done.
Amen.